The child's voice tore through the storm like a blade. Elias Two Rivers yanked the reins hard, forcing his buckskin mare to turn against the wind. The snow blasted his face needle-sharp, turning breath to ice. He pulled his scarf tighter over his mouth and leaned forward, listening. There it was again, high, ragged, cracking with desperation. "Mama, please, you promised, you said we'd be safe." His stomach dropped. That wasn't just panic. That was grief. He spurred the mare forward, eyes straining through the white chaos. The storm was a living thing, howling, blinding, hungry. The world beyond 10 feet didn't exist. Just snow and sound and the cry of a child dying by inches. Elias had ridden storms like this before. He knew what they could take. Then he saw her. A girl, small no more than 5, was crouched in the snow beside a woman's body, shaking her, tugging at her sleeve with fingers that were already turning blue. Her boots were too small, the soles worn slick. Her coat was threadbare, hanging off her like someone else's cast-off. Her cheeks were raw, her cries hoarse. Elias dismounted without thinking. His boots sank thigh-deep into snowdrift as he stumbled toward them, heart hammering against his ribs. "Hey!" he called out, raising his gloved hands. "Little one, I'm not here to hurt you." The girl's head whipped up. Her face was red from cold, and crying eyes wide and wild with fear. "No," she shrieked. "Go away. You can't take her. She's mine." She threw herself over the woman's body, spreading her arms like a shield. Elias stopped. Slowly he dropped to one knee in the snow, keeping his hands raised. The wind shrieked between them. "I'm not here to take anyone," he said. "I swear it. That's what bad men say." "That's what he said." Her voice cracked on the last word. She trembled violently, and her teeth chattered so hard Elias could hear it over the storm. "What's your name?" he asked, voice low, steady. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." She stared at him for a long moment. Her lashes were stiff with ice. "Lena," she whispered. "That's a good name." He nodded toward the still form beneath her. "That your mama?" "She's sleeping," Lena said, but the words quavered. "She got tired. She said she needed to rest just a minute. But she won't wake up." Elias's chest tightened. He'd seen it before during the war after. People who lay down in the cold and never got back up. "I need to check on her, Lena. I used to be a doctor. I just want to help." "You're lying." "No," he said gently. "I'm not. I served as a medic in the Union Army. I've seen a lot of hurt. Let me help." She didn't move. "You see this?" He reached into his coat slowly and pulled out a small cedar carving, a horse worn smooth from years of handling. "This belonged to my wife. She carved it the year our son was born. I've carried it with me ever since." He held it out to her. "If I do anything to hurt you or your mama, you throw this in the fire. That's my promise." Lena hesitated. Then, with trembling fingers, she reached out and took it. "She's cold," she whispered. "I tried to cover her with my coat, but I'm too little." Elias edged forward through the snow, kneeling beside the woman. Her skin was waxy pale, her lips blue. He pressed 2 fingers to her throat, searching. 1 second. 2. 3. There. A pulse, thready faint, but there. "She's alive," he said. "But just barely." Lena gasped. "We need to move," Elias said. "I've got a cabin about 2 miles from here. Fire food blankets. But we have to go now or none of us are making it." The girl stared at him, then at her mother. Slowly she nodded. Elias shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around the woman's limp form. She barely stirred. He gathered her in his arms, she was light, frighteningly so, and turned back toward the horse. Can you walk? Lena nodded fiercely. I'm not a baby? No, ma'am, he said, almost smiling. You're not. He mounted, positioning the woman in front of him, and reached down. Climb up behind me. Wrap your arms around my middle, and don't let go no matter what. Lena climbed into the saddle like she'd done it before. She wrapped her arms around his waist and pressed her face into his back, her breath hot even through the layers. Elias urged the horse forward. The storm swallowed them again. The 2 miles felt like 20. The mare struggled, each step a battle through snowdrifts. Elias guided her by memory and instinct, using the faint silhouette of the tree line and a barely visible ridge to navigate. Lena held tight the whole way, silent now, too exhausted to speak. When the cabin finally emerged from the white void, Elias thought for a moment. It was a hallucination. But it was real. Solid. Smoke curled from the chimney he'd banked the fire that morning. He kicked the door open and carried May inside, setting her on the bed nearest the stove. Lena, he said over his shoulder. Blankets are in that chest. Get out of those wet clothes. He worked fast. His hands moved automatically, unwrapping the woman, removing soaked layers, replacing them with dry ones, building the fire until the cabin blazed with heat. Her pulse strengthened barely under his touch. He checked her pupils. Responsive. She moaned just once. A thin sound, but alive. Is she gonna die? Elias turned. Lena stood wrapped in one of his flannel shirts, the cedar carving clutched tight in both hands. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Not if I can help it. She didn't answer. Just looked down at her mother. Her lip trembled. People always die, she said finally, even when you try real hard to stop it. He felt that like a blow to the gut, but he crouched down in front of her. Come here. She didn't move. You've been brave long enough. Let me carry some of it now. After a moment, she stepped forward. He gathered her into his arms, and she crumpled, silent sobs racking her tiny body. I don't want her to die, she whispered. She promised we'd be safe. I'm going to do everything I can, Elias said. You hear me, everything. Lena didn't answer. She just clung to him, that cedar horse still in her hand like a prayer. The wind rattled the windows. The fire cracked. Outside, the storm kept howling, hungry and unrelenting. But inside the cabin, Elias held the child. And in his arms, something stirred, something old and buried and dangerous. Hope. If you're lying, I'll burn it. That's what you said, right? And the girl's voice came from the floor beside the stove, sharp in the hush that followed the storm. Elias turned from the bed where May lay wrapped in every blanket he owned. Her fever was holding, but she hadn't stirred again since the weak moan hours ago. He'd kept a wet cloth on her head, feeding her drops of water between chapped lips, checking her pulse like a metronome he didn't trust. Now Lena sat on a pile of folded quilts, her damp hair sticking up at odd angles, the cedar carving clenched in her fist. Her small face was pale, but her eyes burned with something that looked older than 5 years. Elias wiped his hands on a rag and walked to her slowly. He crouched beside the stove, letting the warmth soak into his bones. I meant it, he said. Lena didn't blink. It smells like her. The carving. Cedar does that, he said softly. She made it when our son was born. Used to hang it above his cradle. What happened to him? Elias looked into the fire. Fever took him. Same as his mama. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the hiss of pine logs catching flame. Then Lena nodded once, sharp and solemn. I won't burn it. Not yet. He nodded back the faintest motion and stood to tend the stove. He added another log and stirred the pot hanging over the coals. The rich scent of venison and root vegetables filled the cabin. It wasn't much. He'd shot the deer last month and stretched it with whatever he had left from his last run to Hazel's post, but it would feed them through the night. Behind him, Lena stood. She padded across the room barefoot and climbed onto the bench at the table. She watched him without speaking, hands in her lap, the carving still pressed tight between her fingers. "Food'll be ready soon," Elias said. She nodded again. He ladled broth into a tin cup and brought it to her. She accepted it without thanks, sipping slowly, both hands wrapped around the warmth. Her lips were cracked, her fingers red from cold, but she didn't complain. She never had. He watched her over the rim of his own cup. Small, stubborn thing. Fierce. She reminded him of a fox he'd once seen on the ridge in winter, thin and wild-eyed, dragging a rabbit, 3 times its size, back to a den. "You got family out east?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just Mama. Everyone else said she was no good." "Why?" "They said she couldn't take care of me right. That she was sick in the head." Lena frowned into her cup. "She's not. She just got scared." Elias's jaw tightened. "And the man you were running from, he part of your family?" Lena looked up at him sharply. "He's Mama's husband's brother. He said she was crazy. Said he was gonna send me away. Mama said no, so we left." Her voice didn't shake, but her shoulders did. Elias didn't ask more. Not yet. The girl was brittle as glass, and he knew better than to press too hard. Instead, he pulled out an old flannel shirt and knelt by the bed. May was soaked in sweat, her skin hot and dry. He dabbed her brow again and tried coaxing more water past her lips. "Is she gonna die?" Lena asked. Elias didn't look back. "Not if I can help it." "You said that already." He wrung out the cloth and turned to the girl. "I did. You said it about my papa, too. I didn't know your father." "You're lucky." She slid off the bench and walked over to him. Her eyes never left May's face. "He was mean. Mama always said he changed after I was born. Said she stayed because it was safer than leaving. But then he got sick and died, and his brother came." "Silas," Elias said quietly. Lena flinched. "Yeah. Mama said if he found us, he'd take me away. That he had papers and money and people who'd believe him before they believed her." Elias set the cloth back in the bowl. He stared at May. Her face was thinner than it should have been. Hollow cheeks. Faint bruises beneath her eyes that hadn't come from the cold. He'd seen that kind of wear before, in women who spoke little and flinched often. "She protected you," he said. "Always," Lena said. "Even when she was scared." He looked at the girl, this tiny person, who had walked into his life through a snowstorm like a warning or a prayer. "She's still protecting you," he said. "She made it this far." Lena stood on tiptoe and reached out, brushing her mother's hair off her face. Her hand was careful, reverent. "She's gonna get better," she whispered. "She has to." Elias stood, moved to the table, and poured another cup of broth. He brought it to May, coaxed a little more into her mouth. Her lashes fluttered just barely. "She's fighting," he said. "Good," Lena said, nodding once. "'Cause if she dies, I'm not going back. I'll run forever if I have to." Elias believed her. Later, as the fire died down to embers and the storm eased its grip on the cabin walls, Lena curled up beside the stove under a quilt. The cedar horse rested beside her face. She didn't ask for a bedtime story or cry for her mother. She simply closed her eyes and breathed slow and even. Elias sat by the bed, watching May breathe. Her fever hadn't broken, but it hadn't worsened either. When he finally allowed himself to drift to sleep in the chair, it was with the heavy ache of memory settling over him. He dreamed of a snow-covered meadow, of a cradle made from the same cedar his wife once carved, of a boy's laughter that had gone quiet far too soon. A sudden thud snapped him awake. The front door rattled in its frame. Elias rose, muscles stiff, and stepped quietly across the floor. He took his rifle down from above the mantel. Another knock, this time more deliberate. "Elias, 2 Rivers." A muffled voice called. He froze. The voice was familiar, too familiar. He unlocked the door and pulled it open. Hazel Red Elk stood on the porch, dusted in snow. Her gray braid was tucked beneath a fox fur cap, her expression hard. "You need to be ready," she said without preamble. "Someone came through my post yesterday, asking about a woman and a little girl." Elias felt his heart drop. Hazel stepped inside, brushing snow from her cloak. He had money. Said the girl was stolen. Said the woman was mad. She looked past. Elias saw Lena sleeping on the floor and the pale shape on the bed. "Is that her?" she asked. Elias nodded. Hazel stared for a long moment, then crossed the room, knelt by May, and laid a hand on her forehead. Her fingers were gentle, practiced. "She's still in the thick of it," Hazel murmured. "But there's a thread keeping her here. That girl, I'd bet." "She's tough," Elias said. Hazel looked at him. "So is the storm coming after her." He felt the weight in her words like lead in his blood. "What do you want to do?" Hazel asked. Elias looked at the child sleeping by his fire, at the woman who had nearly frozen trying to save her. He tightened his grip on the rifle. "Whatever it takes. If he finds us, he'll take her. He said he'd make me disappear." May's voice cracked through the haze of fever like the wind outside, sudden and sharp. Elias was seated in the corner chair beside the bed, shoulders slumped, half dozing, with his rifle propped against the wall. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the cabin walls. The wind outside had calmed some, but the cold still held its grip like a jealous hand refusing to release the land. He straightened instantly. Her eyes were open, glassy, unfocused, but the first spark of life had returned. Her skin was still pale, lips still dry, but color touched her cheeks, now faint and fleeting, like dawn barely brushing a horizon. Elias rose, careful not to startle her. He took the water cup from the bedside table and dipped a cloth in it, wringing it out gently before placing it against her brow. "Easy," he said, his voice low. "You're safe." May flinched her hand, lashing out with surprising strength, grabbing his wrist. Her eyes locked onto his, wild and wide. "Don't let him take her," she breathed. "Please. Please, I'll do anything. I'll die before he gets her." "Shh," Elias murmured. "No one's taking anyone. You're in my cabin. The storm's past. Your daughter's safe, sleeping right there." He gestured toward the stove where Lena slept, curled in a ball, her face buried in a quilt, the cedar horse pressed to her chest. May's eyes flicked toward her, softening in an instant. Her grip on Elias loosened, though her hand remained on his. "She kept trying to carry me," May said, her voice fragile. "Said we had to find trees, as if trees could stop frost." Elias managed a small smile. "Stubborn little thing." "She gets it from me," May whispered. "But she's better. Braver." He pulled the blanket up higher on her chest and offered the cup of water. "Try to drink." She sipped, slow and shaky, but she managed it. Elias could see her body relaxing inch by inch, as if some part of her had been holding on to terror even in sleep. It hadn't left completely, but now she had a place to put it down. "What's your name?" she asked, after a moment, her voice stronger. "Elias Two Rivers." Her brow furrowed slightly. "Your native half, Salish mother, Irish father." "I grew up around here." May nodded faintly. "That explains the carved horse. The way you keep the fire. Everything's placed with care." Elias tilted his head slightly. "You notice a lot for someone who's been unconscious 2 days. Survival makes you pay attention." Her hand found the edge of the blanket, clutched it like an anchor. "He used to say I made up things, that I exaggerated. But when someone's planning to steal your child, you don't need to exaggerate anything." Elias sat back down the chair, creaking softly under his weight. Silas Grant. That's the man Hazel said was asking questions at the post. May closed her eyes briefly at the name. "He's Edmund's brother. My late husband." After Edmund died, Silas showed up with papers, lawyers, everything neat and sharp. Said Edmund left Lena an inheritance. Said I was too broken to manage it. He offered to take her, to relieve me of the burden. Her fingers curled into the blanket. When I said no, he tried to have me declared unfit. Told the courts I was unstable. Claimed I'd tried to harm myself. He even paid a doctor to testify. Elias felt his jaw tighten. He could see the bruises behind her voice, even if they weren't on her skin. "We left in the night," May continued. "Packed what I could carry, used the last of the money to buy train fare west. I figured if I could get far enough somewhere the courts didn't reach, maybe we'd be free." She looked around the cabin for the first time, as if really seeing it. "I didn't expect to wake up here. I didn't expect to bring anyone back here," Elias said. "Haven't had anyone cross this threshold in years, not even friends." He shook his head. "Lost most of those after the war. The rest, after Sarah and our boy died, I didn't give them reason to stay." May was quiet for a moment, studying him. "You look like someone who stopped speaking out loud unless it mattered. That's not far off." Her lips twitched into the smallest shadow of a smile. It vanished quickly. "I don't know what we're going to do. He'll come. He always does. And he's good at making people believe him. He won't find you here. You can't know that. I can." She opened her mouth to argue, but Elias cut her off gently. "I've lived in these mountains since before the rails reached Helena. I know how to make someone disappear, how to hide a trail, how to see one coming. And I've got friends who'd ride with me if it came to that." May's eyes shimmered. "Why what? Why would you help us?" "You don't know us." Elias leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "Because when I heard your daughter screaming in that storm, I had a choice. I could ride on. Pretend I didn't hear it. But I've already lived with the weight of people I didn't save. I'm not interested in adding to it." May blinked, and one tear slipped down her cheek. "She thinks you're her hero," she whispered. "She's wrong," Elias said. "I'm just the man who answered the scream." They sat in silence for a while. The fire popped. Outside, the wind shifted soft, now brushing snow from the pines. A peace neither of them quite trusted settled over the cabin, like a borrowed coat, warm but temporary. "She'll be waking soon," Elias said. "She's been checking on you every hour." May reached for the cup again. "Then I better look less like a ghost." He smiled at that, and something eased in his chest. "I'll heat more broth." As Elias rose and stepped to the stove, he glanced toward the window. For the first time in days, he could see beyond the glass just trees and snow and the faint outline of the path winding down the slope. It looked peaceful, but the memory of Hazel's words haunted the edge of his mind like smoke on still air. Someone had been asking questions. Someone was looking. and that someone hadn't turned back yet. He stirred the pot slowly, listening to May shift in the bed behind him. When he turned, he found her watching him with quiet eyes, studying the way he moved. Not in fear, but with caution, as someone who'd been burned and now checked every stove twice. He understood that look too well. "Your daughter said something once," he said. What, that she'd run forever if she had to? May's face twisted. "She's 5. She meant it." May nodded slowly, staring into the fire. "She got that from me," she whispered. Elias ladled broth into a cup and brought it to her. She sat up slowly, hands trembling as she took it. "I won't let him find her," she said, "even if I have to keep running until my legs give out. You won't be running alone anymore." Their eyes met, and in that silence a promise was made. From the other side of the room, a soft voice broke through the moment. Mama Lena sat up beneath the quilt hair, tousled eyes wide and blinking. May set the cup down with shaking hands. "Baby," she breathed. "I'm here." Lena stumbled across the room barefoot, throwing herself into the bed, burying her face against her mother's neck. "I knew you'd wake up," she whispered. "I told him you always do." May held her tight, tears running freely now. Elias turned away, letting them have the moment staring out the window again. The storm was gone, but the real weather hadn't arrived yet. "Your name's not the only thing you've been running from, is it?" Hazel Red Elk said it without judgment, without heat. Just truth. The kind that hung in the air like wood smoke settling deep in the lungs, whether you wanted it to or not. May blinked at her from the bed, Lena nestled close beneath the covers, still sleeping after the rush of emotion had worn her out. The fire cast a warm glow over the cabin walls, but Hazel's words made the room feel colder than it had since the blizzard passed. Elias poured coffee in tin mugs, his back turned as if giving them privacy, but his shoulders had gone stiff. He was listening. May sat up straighter, brushing her hand through Lena's hair. "I didn't ask for your help, no," Hazel said, removing her gloves and crouching by the stove, "but you have it all the same." The older woman didn't press. She just held out one hand toward Elias, who passed her a mug without looking. "I brought dried meat potatoes, a little sugar," she added. "James wanted to come, but the mule slipped on the ridge. He's tending it now." May nodded slowly. "Thank you." Hazel sipped, then leaned back on her heels. "You remember what he looked like? Who the man who asked about you?" May's fingers tensed over Lena's shoulder. "Was it Silas Tall? Well-dressed, Eastern voice. Said his sister-in-law was ill. Claimed she'd run off with his niece in the middle of winter." May's breath caught. "That's him. He left heading north, but men like him don't wander for fun. He'll be back, or he'll send someone who doesn't wear such fine boots." Elias finally turned, crossing the room. "How long ago? Day and a half." "He had a horse," Hazel shook her head. "Hired sleigh and guide. Said he couldn't manage the mountain trails." "That buys us some time," Elias muttered. "But not much." May stared at the wall, face pale, jaw tight. Hazel stood and crossed to the bed. Her hands were lined with age, calloused and cracked from years of work, but she brushed a strand of hair from May's cheek with unexpected tenderness. "We've all run," she said quietly. "Sometimes from men, sometimes from memories. But it don't stop the world from turning." "I didn't run because I was afraid," May said, voice flat. "I ran because no one would listen." Hazel just nodded. "And now I still don't know who's safe." Elias walked past them, opening the door. Cold air swept in, clean and sharp. The sky had cleared high clouds, sun, trying to press through the trees, heavy with snow. He stood there for a long moment, watching the ridgeline as if waiting for a shape to emerge from the timber. Hazel stepped beside him. If he sends someone back, they'll come by sleigh or on foot. No one's riding up that slope without breaking a leg. I'll set traps in the woods, Elias said. Snares that warn not wound. I'll send word through the post riders, Hazel added. If anyone asks questions in town, we'll hear about it before they make it this far. He nodded. Thank you. She looked at him for a long beat. You sure about this, Elias? I didn't go looking for it, Hazel. But it found you anyway. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. Inside, May rose from the bed, slowly wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. She walked barefoot across the room, arms crossed each step, careful, like she wasn't quite sure her legs would hold. Hazel watched her come. May didn't flinch under the older woman's gaze. You're brave, Hazel said, but I see the fear chewing at your heels. That man Silas, he's got you cornered in your own head. May's voice was quiet. He doesn't need fists. Just paperwork and a calm voice. Hazel nodded, understanding flashing through her dark eyes. Dangerous kind. I've told my story a dozen times to men with badges and books, May said. They always said the same thing, no proof, no help. Said I sounded hysterical. That's what they call you when you see the truth too early, Hazel said. Too loud for their comfort. May stared at the cedar carving on the table, Lena's prized possession since the blizzard. Her fingers hovered over it. I don't even know what I'd tell the truth about anymore, she whispered. There's no one story. Just pieces. Broken pieces. Hazel laid a hand on hers. Then we start gathering them. You give us the pieces, and we help you build something solid enough to stand on. May looked up. You'd do that for someone like me, for someone with a child in her arms and no one else willing to listen every time. The front door creaked again as Elias stepped inside, shaking snow from his boots. He closed the door with care, then moved to the hearth to add wood. I can give you 2 days' warning if anyone starts heading up this trail, he said. 3 if they're loud. May nodded. Elias glanced at her. You still haven't told me your name. She blinked. You never said it, he added. I figured you had a reason. For a moment, May said nothing. Then she looked down at Lena, still sleeping near the fire, cheeks pink from warmth. She brushed the girl's hair back and kissed her forehead. May Brennan, she said softly. I was Clara Millbrook once, before the running. Elias nodded. Welcome, May. Hazel smiled. Strong name. I picked it myself, May said. After Edmund died. After Silas started circling like a buzzard. I wanted something that couldn't be traced. You know that won't hold forever, Elias said, not unkindly. Not with Silas sniffing around. May turned to him, voice firm. Then I need something stronger than a name. He met her eyes. You'll have it. Hazel's eyes shifted between them, quiet recognition flickering there. I'll be back tomorrow, she said. James will want to see for himself that you're alive. Tell him I'll boil coffee this time, Elias replied. Hazel chuckled. Last time nearly killed him. She pulled on her gloves cloak, already slung over her shoulder, and turned to May. I meant what I said. You're not alone here. May's throat bobbed as she nodded. Thank you. Hazel left without another word. The door clicked softly behind her, leaving only the wind outside and the soft pop of firewood inside. May stood still, arms crossed over the blanket. Elias moved toward the table, grabbing his coat. I'll check the east trail. Won't be long. She didn't look at him, just nodded. When he opened the door, she finally spoke. I didn't lie about anything. But if you want me and Lena gone once I'm strong enough, I'll understand. He paused on the threshold, looked back. I don't want you gone. She blinked, startled. I want you safe, he said. And if keeping you here does that, then you stay. May stared at him for a long, breathless moment. Something unspoken passed between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was ready to name. Elias stepped outside and shut the door behind him. May walked to the window and watched him disappear into the trees, rifle slung across his back. Behind her, Lena stirred, murmuring in her sleep. May pressed her forehead to the cool glass. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was hiding. She felt like she'd been found. His name's Storm, because that's when you found us. The girl stood barefoot on the wooden floor, cheeks flushed from the fire, a wool blanket draped around her shoulders like a shawl. In her hands, she held the small cedar horse, its edges worn smooth by years of touch. Elias sat across from her at the table, the morning light slanting through the frosted window, casting golden beams across the room. He'd carved it the night May's fever broke. A crude thing, his hands weren't what they used to be, but shaped with care. He hadn't meant for it to be a gift, not at first. He told himself he just needed something to do while watching over them. But Lena had found it by the hearth that morning and cradled it like treasure. Elias nodded slowly. Storm fits. Lena held it close to her chest. He was lost like us, but someone came and found him. Elias looked away, throat tightening. She said it so simply, so matter-of-fact, like it wasn't the sort of truth that could cleave a man open. May stood at the counter, spooning oats into bowls. Her hair was tied back with a strip of flannel, the hollows under her eyes softer now, the fire back in her shoulders. She hadn't said much since waking, but Elias noticed the way her eyes lingered on Lena, the way she touched her daughter's hair when she passed, as if needing proof she was still there. I hope Storm likes oatmeal, Lena added, carrying the carving to the table. May smiled faintly and handed her a bowl. He'll have to pretend like you're pretending to like mine. Lena wrinkled her nose, then giggled. Elias sat down quietly, watching them. The cabin felt different now, less like a tomb, more like a place where living things might grow again. They ate in near silence, interrupted only by the sound of spoons against tin. When Lena finished, she slid off the bench and settled near the stove, pulling a small scrap of kindling and pretending to build a stable for Storm. Elias watched her for a moment, then looked to May. You got sleep enough. She sipped her tea. Every bone still aches, but the fever's gone. He nodded, not pressing. She hesitated, then set her cup down. I owe you. No, you don't. You saved us. I did what anyone should have done. No, she said. Most men would have ridden on. He didn't answer. Because she was right. May leaned back in her chair, arms folded. I've had to learn the difference between men who can hurt you and men who choose not to. Her gaze held his. You're the second kind. Those are rare. Elias shifted in his seat. Compliments made him uncomfortable. He didn't know where to put them. Lena said you lost a son. He looked down at the grain of the table. Thomas. He was 6, May waited. Fever took him. Just like it almost took you. He exhaled slowly. My wife, Sarah. She followed him 3 days later. She always said she'd go wherever he did. I'm sorry, May whispered. So was I. The silence thickened. The wind stirred outside, whispering through the trees. Lena hummed softly, lost in her game by the fire. I didn't cry, Elias said suddenly. Not at the funeral. Not after. Couldn't do it. Felt like if I started, I'd never stop. May's eyes shimmered. I understand that. She used to say I was made of stone, that I only softened around the boy. May reached out and rested her fingers gently on the table near his. Not touching. Just close. You found us anyway. Elias nodded. I'm glad it was you, she said. They stayed like that for a moment, two people forged in loss, trying to find the edges of something that hadn't existed in a long time. Something like trust. May pulled back and stood. I should check on the drying herbs. The snowstorm made everything damp. You sure you're up to it? I need to move, she said. My muscles are turning to dust. Elias stood as well. I'll fetch the basket. She waved him off. I can carry it. He didn't argue. Just watched her cross the room, shoulders square, as if determined not to be seen as broken anymore. Outside, the sun had finally crested the mountains, light bouncing off the snow like 1,000 mirrors. The air still bit, but the wind had calmed. May stepped onto the porch, drawing a deep breath. She closed her eyes. It smelled like pine and firewood, and earth beginning to remember what warmth felt like. Elias followed her out, boots crunching softly behind. Your girl, he said. She's stronger than most men I've met. May smiled. She's been surviving since she was born. He glanced at her. How long were you on the run? 7 months. We stayed in a church basement for a while. Then in an abandoned cabin near Bozeman. But every time someone got friendly, I pulled up stakes. Because of Silas. May nodded. He's not a man you say no to twice. What does he want control? Her hands tightened on the porch rail. My husband's will left everything to Lena. Silas wanted it. And me out of the way. Elias's mouth drew into a hard line. I tried the law, hired a lawyer. Silas got him disbarred within weeks. She looked at Elias, eyes dark with fury. I have letters. From Edmund. He wrote about Silas's lies before he died. Said if anything happened to him, I should run. You still have them sewn into my coat lining. That might save you, Elias said. She shook her head. Only if someone's willing to listen. I am, he said. They stood in silence for a moment, the forest stretching out around them. Inside, Lena laughed. A real laugh. Clear, unguarded. Elias and May turned to the sound. May's face softened, her hand drifting to the cedar carving in her pocket. She deserves more than this, she said quietly. More than hiding, always looking over her shoulder. She'll have it. How he met her eyes. We build it. Here. She blinked at him, startled. You don't even know us. I know enough. Her voice dropped. What if he finds us anyway? Elias looked out across the tree line. Then I won't be the man who rides away. May looked at him for a long moment. Neither will I, she said. Elias turned back to the door and reached inside for the extra snow boots near the stove. Hazel says a man came through asking questions, said he'd head north. Silas could be, or someone he hired. What do we do? I know someone who might help. Old friend. Used to be a trapper, now keeps the forge near Dry Creek. Name's Jonas Rigg. Can we trust him? Elias passed her the boots. We'll find out. You tell her to run, Elias. Someone's tracking blood through this snow. Hazel's voice was quiet, but every word carried weight. She stood in the cabin doorway, with her fur-lined coat, still dripping snow, her braid damp from the ride. Her boots had brought in slush, but she didn't seem to notice. Her gaze was fixed squarely on Elias. May, halfway through ladling soup into bowls for lunch, went still. The ladle hovered above the pot, steam curling up like breath from a wound. Lena sat at the table with her cedar horse tucked under one arm, wide eyes flicking between the grown-ups. Elias stood from where he'd been patching a crack near the window frame. He wiped his hands on a rag, slow and deliberate. Where he asked. Hazel stepped fully inside and closed the door behind her. 2 riders passed through the post this morning. Didn't stop for food. Didn't smile. One had a patch on his coat looked federal but not local. The other had city boots and a bad temper. Eastern, Elias asked. Hazel nodded. Boston accent. Asked if anyone had seen a red-haired woman with a child. May set the ladle down gently, her face blank. Too blank. What did you tell them, Elias asked. That no one comes through except mountain wolves and ghosts, Hazel said. But I could see it in their eyes. They're not here to ask. They're here to take. Lena shifted in her seat. Mama May turned and offered her a thin smile, but her hands were trembling. She crossed the room and pulled Lena into her arms. You're okay, sweetheart, she whispered. We're all okay. Hazel watched them, her mouth a thin line. You still got those letters? She asked May. May nodded. Sewn into my coat. Don't let them out of your sight. Elias walked to the stove and grabbed his coat. I'll ride south, he said. If they're coming this way, they'll have to pass Dry Creek or the Ridge. I can head 'em off or get word to Jonas. May looked at him sharply. You said he's trustworthy. I trust him with my life. And Lena's Elias met her eyes. Yes. That was all May needed. I'll pack a bag, she said quietly. If we need to move fast, I want to be ready. Hazel moved beside her. I'll help, and I'll stay here until Elias returns. No, Elias said. You need to get back. If those men double back, they'll remember your face. Hazel hesitated. They already saw me. I'd rather be here if trouble follows. Elias shook his head. You've done enough. Hazel's jaw flexed, but she didn't argue. You have 2 days, maybe less, she said. They didn't know where they were going, but they weren't the wandering kind. One of them carried himself like a man used to giving orders and not waiting for answers. Elias grabbed his rifle and checked the chamber. Fully loaded. I'll take the trapline trail, he said. If Jonas is at the forge, I'll be back by dusk tomorrow. Lena jumped from her seat and wrapped her arms around his leg. Don't let them take Mama. He crouched his hand gentle as it rested on her back. I won't let anyone take anything from us. From us. The word hung in the air like a promise. Elias rose, opened the door, and disappeared into the snow. The trail was quiet. Too quiet. Elias rode through pines heavy with frost, his mare picking her way carefully along the narrow path. The sun was low and pale shadows long and sharp. Every sound felt amplified, the crunch of hooves, the whisper of branches shifting in the breeze, the occasional snap of a distant branch. He moved with the alertness of a man who'd seen ambushes in open fields and assassins in alleys. He trusted his instincts, and they were telling him something was wrong. The tracks he spotted near the halfway point confirmed it. Sleigh runners, not wagon wheels, deep impressions, 2 sets of horses. Lightweight, riders only. They weren't lost. They weren't wandering. They were hunting. He didn't stop to examine further. Time was too short. He nudged the mare into a faster trot. Jonas Riggs' forge was nestled in a notch between 2 rock ridges, surrounded by tall firs and piled scrap metal. Smoke rose steadily from the chimney, dark and thick. The sound of iron meeting iron echoed through the trees. Elias rode straight up to the front. Jonas looked up from his anvil gray beard, dusted with ash, sleeves rolled to his elbows despite the cold. His arms were as thick as fence posts. A hammer hung from his belt. "Didn't expect you till spring thaw," he grunted. Elias dismounted. "I need your help." Jonas stared at him, then wiped his hands and walked into the forge without a word. Elias followed. Inside, heat blasted from the open hearth, pushing back the winter. The forge was cluttered but orderly tools, half-shaped blades, a rifle being repaired on the table. Jonas poured them both coffee from a blackened pot and leaned against the workbench. "You're not the type to bring trouble, Elias," he said. "But it's riding behind you. Woman, child, being hunted by her late husband's brother. Claims on a fortune meant for the girl." Jonas took a long sip. "Figures. They've been staying at my place since the storm. I want them safe. Silas Grant's the one hunting them. He's got connections. I've heard the name. Man's poison with a silver tongue." Elias nodded. "He sent men. Might be with him, might be ahead of him. Hazel spotted them near her post." "What do you need?" "A second set of eyes. A fallback place if the cabin gets hit. And someone who knows how to make a man disappear if need be." Jonas studied him. "You thinking of disappearing too?" Elias didn't answer. Jonas set his cup down. "You love her," Elias looked him squarely in the face. "I want her safe." "That's not what I asked." "I don't know what it is yet," Elias said. "But I know what it isn't. It's not pity. It's not duty. It's something that starts with trust." Jonas clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Good enough. I'll come with you at first light. We'll move quiet." Elias nodded. "Thank you. You owe me horseshoes and 3 bottles of Hazel's choke cherry whiskey. I'll pay in full." They packed quietly, with the ease of men who didn't waste words when time was short. Elias saddled up, heart-tight mind already back at the cabin. When he arrived the next afternoon, the sight of the chimney smoke made him exhale. Hazel had gone. May was waiting on the porch with Lena beside her, both wrapped in wool. She ran down the steps the moment she saw him, Lena on her heels. May's voice cracked. "You're back, I said I would be." She didn't hug him. She didn't cry. But the way her shoulders dropped, the way her hands opened instead of clenched, it was enough. "Jonas is coming," Elias said. "We'll set traps tonight. Tomorrow we fortify. Do you think they're close?" He glanced at the trees. "Closer than I like." Lena reached up and took his hand. "I still got Storm," she said. "I told him you'd come back." Elias looked down at her and smiled even though it hurt. "I always come back." "You want a future. Make it legal. He can't touch what's yours if it's his too." Jonas Riggs' words cut through the cold, like a brand to bare skin. The forge behind him sizzled, steam rising from quenched metal. His gray eyes, sharp as flint, were fixed on Elias, who stood frozen in the doorway, jaw clenched tight. May hadn't heard the conversation at first. She was inside the cabin checking Lena's fever from a cold that started the night before, but she'd caught the tail end of it through the open window. Jonas had spoken loud enough for it not to be a whisper. She stepped onto the porch just as Elias said, "That's not what she came here for." "No," Jonas replied, still calm. "She came here to keep that girl out of a grave or a courtroom, same as you." May's hand tightened on the edge of the post. Jonas looked at her as if he already knew she was there, already knew what her answer would be. His tone softened only slightly. "He's not coming to ask anymore, May. He's coming to take." She didn't answer right away. Her heart thudded against her ribs like a warning bell. Elias turned to her slowly, not startled, more like bracing. You heard him. May nodded once. Jonas walked over to his saddlebag resting on the porch bench. He pulled out a folded parchment and handed it to Elias. This was signed by a preacher I trust. He does legal bindings, keeps everything proper. If you want it done, you ride to him with her before the week's out. You'll have a paper Silas can't tear through. Elias didn't take it. I said I'd protect her. Jonas gave a single grunt of acknowledgement. Then do it with something that holds in court. Silas can twist your word. He can't twist a marriage license. The word marriage hung in the air like smoke. May stepped forward, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Is that really the only way? No, Elias said quickly. Yes, Jonas said at the same time. They stared at each other, then turned toward May. He's not wrong, Elias said quieter. He just doesn't say it soft. May studied him, her voice low and steady. And what would it be? Elias a shield, a strategy. He met her gaze. If that's all it ever is, I'll still wear it like armor. May's eyes didn't leave his. There was no romance in this, no sweeping declarations or wild promises, just two people backed against a wall with a child between them. Jonas looked between them once, then stepped down from the porch. I'll be in the barn. The door clicked behind him, and silence settled in. Lena appeared in the doorway, clutching her cedar horse, her cheeks pink with fever and sleep. Mama May turned immediately and crouched beside her, brushing a hand over her brow. Go rest, baby. I'll be right in. Lena yawned, her eyes fluttering. Okay. She stepped back inside and the door swung shut behind her. May straightened slowly and turned to Elias. I never planned to be anyone's wife again. I never planned to be anyone's anything, he said. They stared at each other for a long moment, and May crossed her arms tighter, the chill suddenly stronger. What would you expect from me? She asked. Nothing. Her lips pressed together. And you, I expect the same. He stepped closer, not touching her, just standing near enough for the warmth between them to be felt. But I will protect you, in name, in deed, or both, however you let me. May didn't answer right away. Her jaw worked slightly as she turned toward the trees. Her voice was quiet when it came. When Edmund died, I thought maybe that was the end of fear. But Silas made it clear, grief and fear aren't the same thing. Elias didn't move. I don't want to be owned, she said. Not by a man, not by a law. You won't be, he said. Not by me. She turned back to him, and something passed between them. Understanding, exhaustion, will. If we do this, she said, I keep my name. I keep myself. You keep everything. May nodded once. I'll go with you tomorrow, she said. Let's get it done. Elias didn't breathe for a moment. Then he did. They didn't speak of it again that night. They ate dinner in a quiet rhythm. Jonas returned just long enough to take food to the barn, then put Lena to bed under a quilt of pine branches and old wool. May sat by her side, humming softly, while Elias sharpened his knife by the fire. There was no ceremony in the way the night passed, just the sound of wind outside and the slow settling of ash in the hearth. The next morning was gray and dry sky stretched in a low ceiling over the mountains. They left Lena with Jonas and rode down toward a small church 2 valleys east. It wasn't much, a wooden building with a crooked cross and smoke rising from a crooked chimney. Inside, a man with wide shoulders and a face carved by sun and silence greeted them with a nod. Elias, the preacher said. Samuel Elias replied. May stood tall beside him, her coat drawn tight and her hands gloved. Samuel looked at her, then at Elias. Quick words or full passage, quick. Samuel opened a leather-bound book and asked the first question. Do you come together freely, with no oath held over you? May spoke first. Yes. Then Elias. Yes. He wrote their names down. May Brennan. Elias 2 Rivers. Ink on paper. Just like that, a line was drawn around them. No kiss, no ring, just a promise made in a stranger's cabin that now had weight under law. They returned that afternoon to find Lena sitting on Jonas's lap, eating squirrel jerky and talking about horses. Jonas gave May a curt nod and handed her daughter back without a word. That night, as Elias poured tea, May sat across the table from him and stared into her cup. You know, this changes things, she said. He nodded. Even if it started as protection, it becomes something else in time. That's what time does. He didn't argue. I don't want to sleep in the same bed. You won't, he said. Not unless you ask. I won't ask. He gave her a small smile. Noted. And that was it. No vows. No touch. Just 2 people who now shared a name because the world had left them no other choice. And outside in the woods, just beyond the ridge, hoofprints began to fill with snow. This isn't about love. It's about surviving winter with a name that keeps wolves out. May said it as she stood in front of the small mirror nailed above the wash basin, her fingers adjusting the buttons on her coat. The sky outside the cabin window was streaked with the last colors of dusk, violet rose fading to cold gray. Elias leaned against the far wall near the stove, arms crossed, watching her as if he didn't know whether to speak or let the silence hold. You sure you want to do this now? He asked. She didn't turn. We already did it. I mean, come back here. Pretend it's normal. I'm not pretending anything, May said. I'm surviving it. She ran a hand through her hair and finally faced him. The firelight painted her in soft oranges and deep shadows. Her jaw was set, but something behind her eyes flickered. Not regret. Something quieter. Something heavier. Elias nodded and stepped forward, reaching for the kettle. He poured 2 cups of tea and handed her one. Lena sat curled in the rocker by the stove, wrapped in 2 quilts, and half asleep, the cedar horse still tucked under her arm. Jonas had retired to the barn, giving them space without needing to say why. May sat down at the table, cradling the cup between her palms. Elias took the seat across from her, neither of them speaking for a while. The room felt too still, like a stage waiting for the next line. Back east, she said finally, marriage was a contract. Property, land, inheritance. You did it so your child wouldn't be born with a scandal on her head. Elias didn't interrupt. I was 17 when I married Edmund. He was 20 years older, charming, careful with words. I thought I was lucky, until I wasn't. You stayed, Elias said. She nodded. Because I thought leaving would be worse. I was right. He took a sip of tea. Why tell me now? Because we're married. Even if it's just ink and paper. He set his cup down and looked at her. I don't need your history to respect your choices. That's why I'm telling you. She stood and walked to the stove, her back to him. I dreamed last night Silas was standing at the end of the bed, just smiling, not moving, just watching. Elias clenched his hands around the mug. I woke up, she said, and you were on the floor. That was the plan. I know, she said. I forgot for a second. Elias stood, walked over to the fireplace, and picked up another log to feed the flames. The orange light brightened again, casting dancing shadows over the walls. "I'm not him," Elias said. "I know," May said, turning back to him. "But part of me is still waiting for the moment you change." He nodded. "Then I guess all I can do is not." The kettle whistled faintly as the last of the steam escaped. Lena stirred and blinked up at them. "Did you two get married already?" May smiled gently. "Yes, baby. We did." Lena rubbed her eyes. "Do I have to call him Papa now?" May looked to Elias. He crouched beside the chair. "You call me whatever you want," he said. "Only if it feels right." Lena studied him for a moment. "Can I still call you Elias?" He smiled. "Please do." She nodded, then pulled the quilt tighter around her and fell back asleep. May stood by the stove, silent. "She never got to call Edmund anything but Sir," she said. "He said Papa was too familiar." Elias sat back at the table. "That's not how it'll be here." May glanced around the cabin, the glowing fire, the patched roof, the hand-carved bench Elias had made years ago and never used for anyone but himself. She felt the shape of the silence again, but it was different now. Not waiting to collapse, just waiting to be filled. "I can help," she said suddenly. "If I'm staying, I need to earn it." "You already do," Elias replied. She shook her head. "Not just surviving. I can stitch, treat fevers, help Hazel at the post. I used to midwife in Tennessee before everything." Elias raised his eyebrows. "You're trained, not by any school, but enough mothers trusted me to hold their babies first." He nodded slowly. "That's good." May sat down again and stared into the fire. "I want a room of my own. Eventually. Not the guest bed. Something built with my hands. A space that isn't borrowed." "I can help you build it," Elias said. She looked up. "That'd be fine." They didn't speak much more that night. Elias returned to the floor beside the fire blanket over his shoulders. May tucked Lena in with the cedar horse resting beside her. Then she lay on the guest bed, staring at the ceiling until her eyes grew heavy. Somewhere deep in the night, she woke with a gasp, but it was only the wind. In the morning, Jonas was already splitting wood outside his coat, steaming from sweat out in the cold air. May helped him stack it, while Elias checked the traps. Lena sat on the porch whittling sticks with a butter knife under Jonas's supervision. It felt normal. As normal as anything could in this place. May tied back her hair and rolled up her sleeves. Her arms still ached from fever, her breath shorter than usual, but she moved with purpose. Later, when Elias returned with a rabbit and news that the traps had been disturbed, Jonas looked up from the porch and said, "Someone's close." Elias nodded. "Tracks along the lower ridge. Fresh." May's heart clenched, but she didn't let it show. That night, as snow began to fall again, they sat around the fire with cups of tea and a silent agreement between them. The wolves were still circling, but now they weren't waiting alone. "We ain't just surviving anymore, May. Feels like we're starting to live." Elias said it while fixing the last hinge on the door of May's new room. His hands steady, his voice quieter than usual, like he wasn't sure it was safe to say aloud. May stood behind him watching as he tested the swing of the door, letting it creak open and shut, open and shut. The walls were raw timber, still smelling of pine, the floor covered with hand-stitched rugs Hazel had traded for dried herbs and soap May made. May didn't answer at first. She reached out, ran her hand along the frame, feeling the grain of the wood. She'd helped cut some of these boards herself, despite the winter air, and the burn still in her lungs from those sick days. Her muscles ached from the labor, her fingers were rough, but she wouldn't have traded the pain for comfort. Elias turned, wiping his palms on a cloth. "Needs sanding, but it'll hold." She smiled faintly. "It's perfect." He gave her a look. "You sure still have time to tell me I measured wrong?" May let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "You did. By a hair. That sidewall bows out." Elias followed her gaze and saw the curve. His lips twitched. Jonas said it added charm. "I'll take charm over perfect," May said. They stepped outside into the weak afternoon sun, the snow melting in patches around the clearing. Lena was crouched beside the horse pen with Jonas, who was showing her how to mend a fence rail with wire and patience. She wore one of Elias's old hats, too big for her, flopping over one eye. She looked proud. May folded her arms. "She's happier." Elias nodded. "Because you're steady again." May looked at him, brushing wind-blown hair from her face. "And you?" He hesitated, eyes squinting into the trees. "Takes a man a while to realize when he's not just breathing. I was doing that for years, since Sarah and Thomas." May glanced down. "I've seen the grave. You keep it clean." He didn't answer. But that silence wasn't empty, it was reverent. He stepped forward and grabbed a bundle of cedar slats stacked near the porch, hauling them toward the woodshed. May followed. "You didn't have to give me a room." "I didn't give it," he said. "You built it. With me." She watched him stack the slats with practiced ease, his movements fluid and sure. "You meant what you said earlier?" she asked. "That this feels like living." He looked up, met her eyes. "Yeah." They stood there a long moment before May turned toward the cabin, her thoughts heavy and fast. Something was shifting, something fragile but real. That night she made stew. Real stew, not just boiled meat and water, but seasoned with dried herbs, thick with root vegetables Hazel had traded. She even dusted the top with black pepper. It smelled like the kind of meal that belonged to a family. Lena ate 2 bowls and asked if they could celebrate something. "What are we celebrating?" Elias asked. Lena chewed, then wiped her mouth. "Mama's room. And me helping Jonas. And nobody being sick." May smiled at her. "That's as good a reason as any." "Do we get cake?" Lena asked, hopeful. "No cake," Elias said. "But we've got honey and cornmeal." May reached for the jar and spooned out a dollop. "Sweet enough," Lena nodded. "Sweet as snowflakes." They all sat a little longer after dinner, warmed by food and the fire. May took out her sewing and began mending the hem of Elias's coat. He protested once, and she told him she'd do worse if he kept complaining. That quieted him. Jonas had gone back to his forge, but not before leaving a fresh stack of wood and warning that more snow was due before week's end. He'd taken a trail deeper into the forest, claiming he needed solitude to think. May had come to understand that was his way of saying he cared, he just didn't like showing it with words. After Lena went to sleep, Elias stepped out onto the porch with a mug of tea. May joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. The moon was out, pale and full, making the snow sparkle like a sea of stars frozen to the earth. "Quiet night," Elias said. May nodded, almost peaceful. They leaned against the railing, not touching, just side by side. The wind was soft, the trees shifting gently. "I started a list," she said. Elias looked at her. "A list of things I want to do." He nodded slowly. "That's good. First thing was build something with my hands. That's done. What's next? May hesitated. Start a garden come spring. Teach Lena how to use a knife without cutting herself. Learn how to ride without looking like a sack of grain. Elias chuckled. You already don't. I've been faking it. They fell quiet again. May sipped her tea. I've never made lists before, she admitted, always too busy looking over my shoulder. You don't have to now. She turned toward him. You really believe that? He nodded once, and she wanted to believe it too. Inside, Lena stirred and mumbled something in her sleep. May moved toward the door, then paused. Elias. He looked at her. I've started sleeping through the night. He nodded again, softer this time. Good. She stepped back into the cabin. That night, while everyone slept, the first flakes of a new snow began to fall, and at the edge of the tree line far off, but certain two dark shapes on horseback, paused under the cover of pine. One of them dismounted. He crouched low and ran his gloved fingers along a half-melted boot print in the snow. Then he smiled. You feel it too, don't you? The quiet pulling tight, like the woods are holding their breath. Jonas said it just after dawn, his breath fogging in the cold air as he stood at the edge of the clearing. Snow blanketed the trees again, light but fresh, not yet trampled. His axe hung from one hand untouched since he'd stepped outside. He wasn't looking at Elias or the tools scattered on the porch. He was watching the ridgeline. Elias followed his gaze. I felt it last night, Jonas added. Old bones don't lie. Elias didn't argue. The cabin had been too still. Even the fire hadn't cracked right. He'd woken twice to nothing but silence, no wind, no creak of the trees, no animal sounds from the woods. Just a hush so deep, it felt like waiting. May stepped onto the porch, pulling her shawl tighter, eyes still clouded with sleep. What is it? She asked, voice low. Jonas shifted. We've got company coming. Close now. May glanced back toward the door where Lena was still curled in blankets. Go sit with her, Elias said gently. Make sure she stays inside. May didn't ask questions. She turned and went without a word. Jonas adjusted his grip on the axe. You think it's Silas himself? Elias shook his head. Not yet. He's too careful. But whoever he sent scouts, maybe lawmen won't come through the front. They'll sneak, Jonas said, spitting into the snow. Think they're smarter than the trees. Elias moved to the barn, pulled his rifle from behind the feed crates, and checked the chamber. Loaded. He slung it over his shoulder, took the pistol from the workbench, and passed it to Jonas. Only fire if you mean it, Elias said. Jonas grunted. I always mean it. The two men moved into the woods behind the cabin, footsteps muffled by fresh snow. The cold bit hard, but neither said a word. They spread out. Elias circling wide through the pines, eyes sweeping every shadow. He didn't have to look long. A flash of movement, a dark coat slicing between trees. Quiet, but too tall to be a deer. Too upright. The man was crouched low, stepping carefully, eyes scanning ahead. Elias crouched behind a stump rifle, steady. Then he saw the second one. This one younger, clean-shaven, wearing city gloves that stuck out like a sore thumb. He carried a long knife on his hip and a holstered pistol he didn't seem confident using. Elias waited until they passed, then rose and followed. He didn't need to shoot. Not yet. Not unless they made it to the cabin. A crack of wood behind him. Jonas. The older man stepped into view from the opposite flank, his expression dark. Elias gestured toward the two intruders who were now stopped beneath a ridge crouched near a cluster of fallen branches. Talking. One of them pulled out a scrap of paper, a map or letter. Elias couldn't see the writing. Jonas leaned close. I count 2. You same. Jonas shifted his weight. One has a star on his belt. Elias nodded. I saw it. Could be a hired deputy. Could be a fake. Jonas cracked his knuckles. What's the play? Elias's voice was ice. We walk them out. Make it known they've been seen. Jonas grinned. Good. I was getting bored. The 2 men descended slowly, careful with their footing. Elias and Jonas stepped from opposite sides of the woods, at once weapons drawn, but low. The younger scout froze. The older one reached for his hip. Elias raised his rifle a hair. Don't. The man stilled. Easy, Elias said. You're a long way from any marked trail. The older man straightened. Just hunting. Jonas barked a laugh. In city boots, with a deputy badge that's cleaner than your face. The younger one looked nervous. We were sent to find someone. I didn't ask, Elias replied. We've got no quarrel, the older man said. We're just doing a job. Elias took a step forward. That job include trespassing on sovereign land. The man blinked. Didn't see a sign. You didn't look hard enough. Jonas stepped closer, his voice low and hard. You keep walking west. Past the ridge. Don't stop. Don't circle back. If we see you again, you won't be talking next time. The younger scout paled. The older one opened his mouth. Elias cut him off. If you want to live, don't speak. The tension hung in the air, like a match just short of flame. Then the men turned. They walked. Not fast, but not slow either. When they were out of sight, Elias lowered his rifle. Jonas exhaled. Think they'll listen, no? Elias said. But they'll think twice about how quiet these woods really are. They hiked back to the cabin in silence. May was waiting on the porch, Lena behind her, with her hand wrapped in May's skirt. May's eyes searched Elias's face. You saw them. He nodded. Lawmen, not the kind you trust. May turned and picked up Lena, holding her close. We need to be ready. We are, Elias said. But if they're this close, Silas is too. May's jaw clenched. Then we meet him on our feet. That night they fortified the cabin. Jonas set traps along the southern path. May packed emergency supplies, a bundle of food, clean water, a coat for Lena. Elias oiled the rifles and kept one by the door. The fire burned low, but no one slept. May sat at the table with a lamp beside her, writing something on a sheet of paper, with slow, careful strokes. Elias watched. What is it? A statement, she said. About what happened. Who Silas is. What Edmund wrote. If anything happens, Hazel can take it to the courts. He nodded. Lena curled against May's side. Do we have to run again? May kissed her forehead. Not yet, baby. Maybe not ever. Lena clutched her cedar horse and closed her eyes. When the last candle was out, Elias stood at the window. The woods were dark. The quiet was back. And this time it wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. You always thought you'd hear him coming, didn't you? But men like Silas, they slip in while you're sleeping. Hazel's voice was quiet, but every word landed like a rock tossed into still water. She stood just inside the cabin, snow clinging to her cloak, her cheeks red from the cold. She hadn't sent word before arriving, hadn't waited to be welcomed. She knew time was too thin for pleasantries. May was seated by the fire, Lena in her lap. Small fingers wrapped tight around the cedar horse. Elias stood near the stove, arms folded, face unreadable. Jonas paced near the window, a knife glinting on his belt. Hazel took off her gloves and tossed them on the table. He was in Dry Creek yesterday. May's body tensed beneath the quilt. Silas Hazel nodded. Fresh-shaven, clean coat, silver pocket watch. Said he was looking for his dead brother's widow. Spoke so sweet even the preacher nearly offered him tea. And Elias asked. He offered gold to anyone who helped. Gold and promises. Hazel turned toward May. I told the townsfolk what I could. Some listened. Some will sell a soul for less. May looked at the fire jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. He's close then. Hazel nodded. He won't come through the front, but he'll come. And soon. Lena looked up. Mama May stroked her hair. We're safe, baby. We're together. But even as she said it, the lie tangled with the truth. Hazel pulled a folded sheet of paper from her cloak and passed it to Elias. This was posted on the Dry Creek board. Elias opened it. May didn't need to see to know what it was. A notice. Official looking. Bearing a signature forged from somewhere back east. A claim of guardianship. Custody. Legitimacy. A bounty. He filed it with a federal seal, Hazel said. Made it legal enough to scare the weak-hearted. May took the paper and read the words. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes didn't water. But something inside her cracked. Just slightly. He's not just trying to take her, she said. He wants to erase me. Jonas slammed the knife onto the table blade, sticking upright in the wood. We can end this. One clean shot. Elias didn't flinch. That's not justice. That's war. He's declared it already, Jonas growled. Hazel interjected. If we shoot first, it's their story that wins. The widow, the savage, the outlaw. That's how they'll tell it. May stood slowly, setting Lena down. She crossed the room and stared at the paper in Elias's hands. What if we bring the story to them first? She asked. Hazel tilted her head. What do you mean I wrote a statement? I have the letters Edmund sent me. I have bruises still fading. May's voice was steady. If I go to the post in person, if I stand in front of them and speak it plain, maybe the truth will be louder than Silas's lies. Elias looked at her. It's dangerous. So is silence. Lena clung to her leg. Mama, don't go. May knelt beside her. I won't be gone long, baby. And I won't be alone. She looked at Elias. He nodded once. We ride at first light. Hazel set a hand on May's shoulder. I'll prepare the post. Let the right ears know you're coming. Jonas grunted. I'll stay. Guard the cabin. No one gets past me without bleeding. May embraced Lena tightly, breathing her in like it might be the last time. Then she stood tall. The trail to Hazel's post was treacherous in winter, even more so with the air tight as it was that morning. Elias rode ahead. May, just behind her coat, pulled tight letters sewn into the lining, pressing against her heart like a second pulse. Neither spoke much as the snow fell softly around them. Halfway through the trail, they spotted fresh tracks, human and horse, leading in the opposite direction. Elias dismounted and studied them. 2 riders, he said. Heavy horses. Not local. Silas's men, May asked. Could be. They're looking. Then let's give them something to find. They rode on. By the time they reached the post, the sun had broken through the clouds, casting a pale light across the clearing. Hazel stood by the door, arms folded, a crowd already gathered. A few townsfolk, the preacher, a trapper with a crooked jaw. A woman May remembered from her first month in town, the one who'd given Lena a crust of bread without asking a name. May's hands were ice beneath her gloves as she dismounted. "Are they ready to listen?" she asked. Hazel nodded. "They're ready for truth." May stepped inside. The post smelled of tobacco and pine soap warmth from the fire wrapping around her. She stood near the hearth and unbuttoned her coat slowly. The room fell silent. She pulled the papers from her lining. "My name is May Brennan," she said. "I was married to Edmund Grant. I have a daughter. Her name is Lena. She is 5 years old, and the only person in this world who belongs to me." The crowd didn't shift. Not yet. "My brother-in-law, Silas Grant, wants to take her. Not because he loves her. Not because he believes I'm unfit. But because there's money involved. Land. Control." A flicker of movement, someone shifting in a chair. "He forged documents. Paid off a judge back east. Tried to have me committed. When I refused, he tracked us. Threatened us. And now he's here." She unfolded Edmund's letters and passed them to Hazel. "Read them. They're signed. His words. Not mine." Hazel took the pages and held them up. "These will go to Judge Niles. He's slow but fair." May's voice dropped. "I'm not asking for protection. I'm asking to be seen. As a mother. As a woman. As someone who has tried every single day to protect her child from a man who wears a smile like a weapon." The silence cracked, finally. The preacher stood. "I knew Edmund. He wasn't a saint, but he feared his brother more than the Lord." The woman from town nodded. "I saw Silas once. Snake eyes. No child deserves that." Elias remained near the back, watching. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. May stood straighter. "Whatever happens, I will not run again. If he wants to face me, let him do it here in daylight, where the whole town can see who stands behind him and who stands in front of him." Hazel stepped forward and placed a hand on May's shoulder. "You won't stand alone." May didn't cry. She didn't crumble. She simply nodded the fire behind her, casting a tall, unwavering shadow. And somewhere in the trees outside town, a man watched from a saddle, smirking. He touched the silver watch in his coat pocket and turned his horse toward the ridge. The game had just begun. "You talk like a gentleman, Silas, but your hands stay clean because someone else always does your dirty work." May stood her ground in the middle of Dry Creek's main street, boots planted in the slush, coat unbuttoned despite the bitter wind. Her breath fogged in the cold air, but her voice was steady. The folded letter she'd read aloud at the post was clutched in one hand. The other was clenched at her sick thumb. Silas Grant sat tall on his horse, flanked by 2 riders in dust-colored coats, both armed. His black gloves were spotless. His hat was crooked just enough to seem casual, like everything about him controlled, practiced, and false. "You always had a mouth on you," he said smoothly. "No wonder Edmund was so often quiet around you." May didn't flinch. Behind her, Hazel stood just outside the post door, arms folded. Elias leaned against the rail in front of the general store, one hand resting near his holster. Jonas wasn't visible, but May knew he was close. Hidden. Watching. Waiting. "You come to take something?" Silas Elias asked, voice flat. Silas tilted his head. "I came to collect what's mine." "She's not yours," May said. "She never was." Silas smiled. Edmund named me guardian in his original will. That makes her legally mine, and you, he nodded at her with mock courtesy, a fugitive. And a thief. Hazel barked a laugh. Funny how that original will didn't surface until after May disappeared. Silas's eyes flicked to her, his smile freezing for just a second. You interfere again, Miss Red Elk, and I'll have your post shut down for harboring fugitives. You're not in Boston anymore, Elias said, and you've got no jurisdiction here. Silas raised a hand. The rider on his left stepped forward and held up a sealed document. This here's a writ issued by the Federal District Court of Massachusetts, authorizing the removal of the minor child Lena Grant from unlawful custody and returning her to her rightful guardian. The townspeople had begun to gather. A few murmured. A few cursed under their breath. May didn't take her eyes off Silas. That paper is soaked in lies. Lies with signatures, he said, his smile returning. May took a step forward. You hit Edmund, broke his ribs, threatened to kill him if he left his estate to me. He wrote me letters afraid cornered, begging me to protect Lena if anything happened to him. You forged those. I didn't. Then prove it, Silas snapped. May held the letter high. They're in Edmund's hand. Signed. Hazel sent copies to the judge. The court will rule. But until then, I am not giving you my daughter. Silas looked down at her from his saddle, like a man weighing his next meal. And if I take her, Elias straightened. Jonas stepped from behind the livery shotgun resting casually across his arms. Try it. Hazel unsnapped her coat, revealing the pistol holstered beneath. The preacher stepped out from the church. Silas Grant. I suggest you dismount and speak like a man, not a snake. Silas's smile wavered. Elias stepped off the boardwalk and came to stand beside May. You want to test this town, he asked. Go ahead. But you won't ride out looking the same. Silas stared at them. Then he exhaled sharply and dismounted, boots crunching into the slush. He removed his gloves slowly, theatrically. I will file charges, he said. Every name here will go in my report. When this is done and the courts decide in my favor, there will be consequences. May's voice was quiet, but it cut through the crowd. You won't win this time. We'll see, Silas said, stepping closer. How long can you hold out, May? How long until the law favors blood over words, money over truth? May met his eyes. Longer than you think. Silas turned. Let's go, he barked to his men. They mounted quickly and turned toward the southern trail, riding fast through the melting snow. Silas didn't look back. The crowd slowly began to break apart. Hazel came to May's side. You did it. No, May said. We delayed him. Elias's hand brushed lightly against hers. You didn't back down. May looked up at him. He'll find another way. We'll block it. The preacher approached, offering May a nod. You've got good folk behind you. I'll write my own letter to the judge. Thank you, she whispered. Hazel glanced around. You should head back to the cabin. He'll lick his wounds tonight, but I wouldn't trust the next few days. May nodded. We'll ride out now. Elias helped her mount, while Hazel gave her a parcel, extra bread-dried meat, a wrapped bottle of elderberry syrup for Lena. Tell that girl of yours she's brave, Hazel said, just like her mother. May gripped the reins, heart still pounding, and looked back at the town. People had gathered not just to gawk, but to stand, to witness, to remember. Silas had power money reach, but she had something else. A voice. a place. People who wouldn't let her fall without a fight. As they rode back into the woods, the snow began to fall again. Quiet, slow, gentle, a whisper from the mountains. Lena was waiting on the porch when they returned. Jonas had kept her busy sharpening sticks and boiling potatoes. She ran straight into May's arms. "Did he come?" she asked. May held her close. "He did. And he left." "Is he gone for good?" May met Elias's eyes over her daughter's head. "No," she said. "But we're ready now. Sometimes the storm don't break things, it shows you what was already cracked." The wind howled through the pines louder than it had all winter, pushing snow sideways across the clearing like a curtain of ice. Inside the cabin, every creak and groan of the timber felt like a warning. The shutters rattled. The fire hissed. The roof held, but only just. May stood at the stove ladling stew into bowls with steady hands. Her face was calm, but her ears were tuned to every sound outside. Elias sat by the door with his rifle across his lap, boots-laced coat within reach. Lena leaned against May's side blanket over her shoulders, and Cedar Horse clutched tight in her arms. Her eyes were wide, not from the storm, but from the weight of silence grown heavy over the past 2 days. Since Silas had left Dry Creek, they hadn't spoken much. Everyone was listening, waiting. Jonas sat at the table sharpening a knife that didn't need sharpening. "He'll come at night," he said finally. "Men like him always do." Elias nodded without looking up. Under noise, under dark, under cover. May handed Lena a bowl and crouched in front of her. "You stay close to me no matter what happens. If I tell you to run, you run to the barn, the back loft. You remember." Lena nodded, lower lip trembling. "I'm not scared," she whispered, "but my hands shake anyway." May touched her cheek. "That just means your body knows this matters." The windows shuttered again, and Jonas looked toward the eastern wall. "Snow's covering their tracks as fast as they make 'em. That cuts both ways," Elias said. "Harder for us to spot them, too." Jonas grunted. "Not if you know what to hear." They finished the meal without much talk, spoons scraping quietly against the bowls. Outside, the wind screamed like something wounded. May cleared the table, set the dishes aside, and lit the lanterns. She moved with purpose, wary but focused. Elias checked the traps once more. Jonas strung a bell system along the fence that would rattle if anyone crossed without knowing where to step. May double-checked the stash of bandages, poultices, and dried herbs tucked in a box beneath her bed. Night fell fast. By the time they settled in, the cabin felt like a tinderbox, warm, tense, dry in the throat. May tucked Lena in the guest bed with 2 quilts and a promise. "I'll be right here," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." "Will he hurt you?" Lena whispered. "No," May said, brushing her hair back, "because there's too many people between him and me now." Lena nodded and curled under the blankets, eyes still open. Elias stood at the window watching. "He won't risk a full approach," he said. "He'll try to split us. Divide." Jonas nodded. "Then we don't separate." May sat by the hearth, arms crossed tightly. They waited and waited. The storm gave them hours of nothing but wind. Then a sound. It was soft, nearly lost in the wind, a muted jangle. The bell Jonas had strung. Elias stood immediately, rifle lifted. Jonas ducked low, moving toward the rear window. May's breath hitched, but she didn't make a sound. Another jangle. Faint, then gone. Elias signaled with 2 fingers east side. Jonas eased the shutter and peered through a crack in the slats. Movement in the trees. One figure, Maybe too clean, Elias muttered. He's drawing us out. May stood. I'll stay with Lena. No, Elias said quickly. We don't split. Another jangle this time from the west. Jonas hissed. It's a circle. They're flanking. I'll take the rear. You cover the front, Elias said. May lock the door behind us. She nodded, moving to bar the door with the thick beam they'd set just that morning. Elias kissed Lena's forehead quietly, before slipping out the back with Jonas. May waited, heart pounding. For a long minute there was nothing but wind. Then a voice. May. She froze. It came from the trees. A man's voice, calm, controlled. May, the voice called again, clearer now. It's Silas. You know me. She moved to the window and opened the shutter a crack. He was standing just beyond the fence coat, flapping gloved hands held out like a preacher delivering benediction. You can end this, he said. Come out. Bring the girl. No one has to get hurt. May clenched her jaw. You think you're surrounded, Silas continued, but you're not. These people, Elias, that half-drunk trapper, the old woman at the post, they don't care about you. Not really. May pulled the letter Edmund had written from her apron pocket, the one she'd carried since the day she left. She unfolded it with careful fingers. You can't protect her forever, Silas called. May moved to the door, still closed, still barred. She didn't open it, but she spoke through it loud and clear. She's not yours, and I'm not afraid of you. Silence outside. Then the sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate. May's breath caught, then shouting. Gunfire cracked. May dropped to her knees beside Lena's bed, covering her daughter with her body. Another shot. Then two more. A thud against the back wall. Then silence. May waited. The minutes dragged. Then a knock, fast, rhythmic, the pattern Elias had taught her. She unbarred the door. Elias stepped inside, rifle smoking. Jonas followed, dragging a man by the collar, one of Silas's scouts. The man was groaning, leg bloodied. He's alive, Jonas said. For now. May looked past them into the dark. Where's Silas? Elias's jaw clenched. Gone. Ran when the shots started. He'll come back, Jonas muttered. He's the kind that always does. May looked down at Lena, who stared up at her with wide, tearful eyes. I'm okay, Mama. May kissed her forehead. You were so brave. Elias knelt beside them, his voice low. He didn't get in. He tried, but he failed. May looked up at him. For now. Elias nodded. For now's enough. We hold that until the morning. And so they did. Together under the weight of wind and silence and the promise that nothing had cracked yet because they were holding it all upright. By will, by love, and by the strength of people who refused to run. When the snow melts, the truth won't hide under it anymore. The thaw came suddenly, after weeks of hard frost and biting wind. The morning air broke warmer wet with fog and the scent of damp pine. Patches of earth peeked through the white in the clearing, the sound of water dripping from the eaves of the cabin like a steady ticking clock. May stood outside on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, watching steam rise from the sodden ground. Her boots sank into slush where once there was powder. Behind her, the door creaked as Elias stepped out. He offered her a tin cup of warm tea, fingers brushing hers as she took it. Feels different today, he said, scanning the trees. May nodded. It's not just the weather. Jonas had already ridden into Dry Creek at first light. He'd tied the wounded scout to the saddle like a sack of grain and muttered something about putting him in a cell or under a pine depending on what the man said, once sober. Hazel sent word through a passing trapper Judge Niles had arrived in town. It was happening. The moment May had run from then turned to face was now close enough to taste. Inside the cabin, Lena was coloring beside the hearth with charcoal sticks Elias had cut for hers. She was humming to herself, quiet, focused, the cedar horse beside her as always. May looked over the land, her land now, even if nothing official had yet declared it. The cabin, the clearing, the fence they'd mended with their hands. It wasn't just a hiding place anymore. It was home. Elias leaned against the porch post, sipping from his own cup. We should ride soon. Town'll want our side told first. I've already told it, May said. He looked at her. Now it has to be heard. In front of the law. She nodded. Lena stays. I'll stay with her, Hazel said, stepping out from around the barn. She'd arrived an hour ago, quiet as snowfall, carrying a satchel of healing herbs and a rifle across her back. May arched a brow. You come to help or watch? Hazel smiled. Both. Inside, May helped Lena dress and set out lunch. The girl seemed unaware of the weight pressing down on the cabin. Or maybe she was just stronger than most 5-year-olds had any right to be. When May crouched to hug her goodbye, Lena whispered, "Will you win?" May pressed a kiss to her temple. It's not about winning. It's about standing. She and Elias rode out late morning, taking the trail Jonas had carved down the frozen slope. Birds had begun to return. The silence of winter was cracking. Dry Creek looked smaller than usual. Or maybe it was just that May wasn't looking at it like a place of fear anymore. The judge waited in the schoolhouse papers spread across the front desk like a war table. His spectacles hung low on his nose, his coat neatly pressed despite the long travel. Beside him sat a scribe with ink-stained hands and sharp eyes. Silas was already there, clean, smug, dressed like a banker headed to a funeral. He didn't look at May as she entered. Just stared straight ahead, hands folded like he was already counting the inheritance. Judge Niles cleared his throat. We'll keep this civil. No shouting, no threats, just truth as the law allows. He looked to May. You may speak first. May stepped forward, holding Edmund's letters in one hand, the sworn statement Hazel had carried to the post in the other. She laid them before the judge. My husband feared his brother, feared what he'd do to our daughter if left unchecked. That fear turned out to be wisdom. Silas tried to have me committed. He forged legal guardianship and pursued us across 2 states. The judge read the top page, nodding slowly. And these letters, written in Edmund's hand, verified by people who knew his voice, his style. He left them for me, for Lena. Silas finally spoke. My brother was ill when he wrote those. Addled. His mind was slipping. May turned to him, voice steady. Then why did you threaten him? Why beat him? I never. Witnesses say otherwise, the judge interrupted. And a man's decline doesn't erase a paper trail. These documents are credible. I see no basis for your claim of guardianship. Silas stiffened. The estate will be handled separately, the judge said. But the child is not property. The room fell quiet. May exhaled. Not victory, just breath. Elias moved beside her, silent but solid. Judge Niles set down the papers. This case is clear. May Brennan retains full custody of Lena Grant. No further legal action is warranted. Silas didn't move, didn't blink. The judge turned to him. Any further attempts to abduct the child, falsify documents, or intimidate witnesses will be considered criminal. Silas stood slowly, face like stone. "You think this is over?" Elias stepped forward. "It is for you." Silas stared at May one last time. There was no rage in his face, just the cold fury of a man denied control. Then he left. When they stepped out into the street, the townsfolk had gathered. They didn't cheer. They didn't speak. But their presence, quiet shoulder to shoulder, was its own kind of justice. Hazel met them at the edge of the road. "Well, it's done," May said. Hazel handed her the reins. "Then let's go home." They rode back slow. No rush. No shadows on the trail. At the cabin, Lena ran to meet them, arms wide, a question in her eyes. May scooped her up and held her close. "He's gone," she said. Lena buried her face in her shoulder. "I knew you'd come back." May looked at Elias, then at Hazel, then out across the clearing. The snow was still melting, but the ground underneath was solid. Ready. There'd be a new season now, and it would belong to them. "I ain't sure what peace is supposed to feel like, but I reckon this is close." Elias said it softly, more to the woods than to May, as they stood shoulder to shoulder outside the cabin, looking down over the fields beyond the ridge. The snow was nearly gone now, replaced with soft soil and patches of green that hadn't been seen in months. Somewhere nearby, a creek had come to life again, trickling through the thaw. The wind smelled like pine and wet moss, alive. May watched Lena run through the clearing, her feet bare arms stretched wide like wings. The girl's laugh echoed off the trees. She was chasing a chicken that didn't belong to them. Hazel had brought it as a gift and left it as a joke, but now it clucked like it was part of the family. "I don't know what peace feels like either," May said. "But this doesn't feel like running." Elias looked at her then. "No, it doesn't." Inside the cabin, the scent of coffee mingled with the damp earth, the fire low but steady. Jonas had spent the week building a smokehouse near the edge of the property, grumbling about the tools being dull and the timber too soft, but he hadn't stopped smiling. Hazel had carved 2 extra chairs for the table, saying things looked more settled now, and settled folk needed places to sit. May had sewn curtains for the windows, small ones, just enough to feel like something was hers. She didn't ask permission. She didn't need to. That morning she'd woken before dawn and sat on the porch wrapped in Elias's coat. She'd watched the first light stretch across the trees and thought not about Silas, not about running, but about the future. About Lena learning to ride. About planting a garden. About maybe someday, maybe soon, sharing a bed with the man who'd never asked more than she was willing to give. Peace wasn't a loud thing. It crept in like sunrise. Slow, quiet, certain. Lena fell in the dirt with a shriek of laughter, the chicken escaping her grasp yet again. May grinned. "She needs shoes," Elias said. "She needs more than shoes," May replied. "We all do." Elias nodded. "We'll build it." Bit by bit. May stepped down into the yard and reached out to help Lena up. The girl's face was streaked with dirt and joy. She wrapped her arms around her mother's waist. "Can we keep the chicken?" May glanced at Elias. He lifted a brow. "Looks like the chicken's already decided." That afternoon, they worked the soil behind the cabin. The last frost had passed, and May's fingers itched to plant something that would grow under her hands. Hazel brought seeds, onion, carrot, and beans in a small cloth bag. She said came from her grandmother's house. "This land's ready," she said, pressing the dirt between her fingers. "It's been waiting." May knelt and dug the first row, Lena beside her, mimicking every motion. Elias hammered stakes into the corners to mark where the fencing would go. Jonas stood by the edge with a rifle slung across his back, just in case, but his eyes weren't wary anymore. Just watchful, protective. By sundown, the first bed was planted. They sat around the fire that night, with full bowls of stew, the scent of herbs and smoke thick in the air. Lena dozed in May's lap, thumb tucked in her mouth, feet dirty, heart full. Hazel poured whiskey into tin cups. Elias took his quietly. May didn't refuse hers. To the girl who stood her ground, Jonas said, lifting his cup toward May. May smiled. To the people who didn't let me fall. They drank. The fire crackled. The stars came out clear and sharp above the treetops. Elias leaned close. I want to show you something. May followed him past the garden, up the slope behind the barn. The trees thinned there, and a small outcropping of rock jutted over the forest, like a balcony into the sky. She hadn't been up this way before. Elias had cleared it quietly in spare hours between chopping wood and checking traps. He took her hand as they stepped onto the ledge. Below them, the whole valley stretched wide mountains in the distance, river winding like a silver ribbon, the roof of the cabin just visible through the trees. May's breath caught. I call it your view, Elias said. You fought for this. Figured you should see all of 50 you won, May swallowed. Her hand tightened around his. This isn't just mine, she said. He turned to her. It is. She looked at him in the dusk. Do you want it to be? Elias didn't flinch. I already decided that. He didn't ask for permission to kiss her. He didn't have to. The moment was its own answer. When their lips met, it wasn't a question. It was a promise. Soft. Certain. May pulled back only slightly. I don't need saving. I know, he said. You just need someone who sees you. She smiled. You do. They stood there as the night deepened, arms wrapped around each other. The stars above them, the cabin below the fire still burning behind the windows. And for the first time in years, May let herself believe that morning would come without fear, that tomorrow would belong to them. Not because they were lucky, but because they'd earned it. I didn't build a life just to survive in it. I built it so she'd never have to run. The morning sky was soft with spring clouds, the kind that carried more promise than rain. Dew clung to the edges of the wild grass around the cabin, glittering like it was spun from glass. May stood at the edge of the garden with her sleeves rolled high and her boots' muddy hands in the soil as she tugged out early weeds. She moved slowly, methodically, but not with worry, just care. Lena was nearby, sitting cross-legged on a flattened sackcloth, carefully sorting seeds into small piles: corn beans, sunflowers. Her tongue poked from the corner of her mouth in deep concentration, and her cedar horse sat beside her like a silent wooden overseer. Elias was mending the west fence. A few rails had split after the last storm, and he'd said this time he wanted to reinforce them with iron nails instead of the old wooden pegs. Something about things lasting longer when they were forged right. May watched him for a while, the way he bent, lifted, hammered, each movement sure and unhurried. It struck her that she hadn't seen him run in weeks, not to chase trouble, not to fetch water, not to patrol the edges of their world. He didn't need to anymore. That was the difference. Not just the weather or the soil or the shape of the land. It was the way the fear had uncoiled from their bodies. It had taken time, and not just the time marked by seasons. It had taken silence, holding, staring down ghosts with calm eyes and steady hands. And it had taken other people, Hazel, Jonas, the preacher, even the townsfolk who once looked at May like trouble, but now nodded to her like kin. There was a letter from Judge Niles sitting folded on the kitchen table confirming the final order. May Brennan was Lena Grant's sole guardian. Silas Grant's appeal had been denied. Final. The word tasted like sunlight. Elias finished the last nail and stood stretching his back with a grunt. He caught May watching and gave her a look, not a question. Just a knowing glance exchanged like a private language. She smiled and wiped her hands on her apron, walking back toward the cabin. Inside, the coffee was already cooling. She poured a cup and sat at the table, the letter beside her untouched since yesterday. She read it again anyway. She didn't need it anymore, not really. But seeing it in print, seeing her name, Lena's name, the black ink that said, "You are safe," it still stirred something deep. The sound of hooves in the distance made her lift her head. Not fast, not urgent. Just one rider. Familiar. Hazel. May stepped onto the porch just as the rider emerged from the trail dust on her cloak, a small bundle strapped behind the saddle. Morning, Hazel called, sliding off the horse. May raised a brow. "You look like you've got something." Hazel grinned and pulled the bundle free, unwrapping it. Inside was a jar of plum preserves, a spool of red thread, and a small leather-bound book. "From the preacher's wife," Hazel said, handing over the bundle. "She said you might want to write things down now, not to forget." May turned the book over in her hands. It smelled like leather and ink untouched. "I wouldn't know what to write," she said. "Start with the truth," Hazel replied. "You're good at that." They shared a look. No need to speak about what had come before. Inside, Lena had run to show Hazel the tiny green sprout poking from the soil in her seed cup. Hazel knelt beside her like it was the most important thing she'd seen all week. Elias joined them on the porch, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "You hear from Jonas?" Hazel nodded. "He's staying near the ridge for now. Says the quiet suits him." Elias smiled. "We'll bring him some of Lena's biscuits next week. That'll drag him back." They watched May through the window as she opened the little book and sat down with a pencil. Elias leaned against the porch post. "She writes like she stands solid." Hazel nodded. "She finally knows it's hers. This life." May didn't write much at first. Just a date, and Lena's name, then her own, then a line she didn't plan. "This is the first day I haven't looked over my shoulder in 5 years." She closed the book and held it for a moment, the weight of it small but meaningful. By the time the sun reached its highest point, the garden was watered, the horses brushed, and the cabin smelled of simmering beans and rosemary. Elias built a new bench near the fence where Lena liked to sit and watch the trees, and May helped her carry over the cedar horse, placing it right in the middle. "Now he can watch too," Lena said. The wind picked up slightly, lifting the loose strands of May's hair, and for a second she felt the tug of every mile she'd traveled to get here. The bruises, the nights on the run, the sound of Silas's voice in her dreams, the cold weight of fear. But none of it lived here anymore. She crouched beside Lena and put an arm around her. "Do you know why we plant seeds?" she asked. Lena nodded. "So something new can grow." May smiled. "That's right." They sat in the sunlight, not speaking. Elias approached with 2 mugs of water and handed one to each of them. May took hers and looked up at him, her voice quiet. "Did you ever think we'd get to this part?" He shook his head, lips curving. "I hoped. But no, I didn't let myself picture it." May looked around at the clearing, the smoke rising from the chimney, the rows of little green shoots stretching toward the sky. "I did," she said. "Even when I was afraid. Even when I thought it'd kill me." He crouched beside her, brushing a bit of soil from her sleeve. "You built it. We all did." Lena yawned and leaned against May, the kind of tired that only came from a day spent in open air and good things. May ran her hand through Lena's hair and whispered something soft. A promise. One made not from fear, but from strength. They stayed like that as the sun began to drop low behind the trees, painting everything gold, and no one looked over their shoulder.